Luke had been riding along the quiet fence line for years, and he knew every post, every shadow, and every sound the land usually made. But that evening felt different from the start. The sun had dipped low behind the hills, painting everything in deep gold and long, stretched shadows. Luke was tired from the long day, but he was used to working until sundown. His horse, Bandit, walked slowly, as if sensing something unusual in the air. Luke didn't think much of it at first. Sometimes the land itself seemed to whisper warnings, and most cowboys learned to ignore that feeling. But tonight, it grew stronger with every few steps. He reached the old fence at the far end of his ranch, the place where the land touched the edge of Apache territory. It was always a quiet border. Luke respected it, and the Apache respected him. They didn't mix much, but there was no hatred between them. He looked down the fence line, ready to turn back home, when he heard a sound so soft he thought he imagined it, a weak voice, carried by the wind. He stopped Bandit and listened again. At first, there was only silence. Then, another faint sound reached him. It almost sounded like someone trying to speak. "Who's out there?" Luke called out, not expecting an answer. He waited, leaning slightly forward in his saddle. The silence returned, but something pushed him to look closer. He urged Bandit forward, guiding the horse slowly along the fence until he saw something that made him straighten in shock. There, tied to one of the fence posts, was a young Apache woman. Her hands were bound behind her with rough rope, her hair tangled and dusty. Her face pale from exhaustion. Her legs were half collapsed beneath her, as if she had tried to stay standing but lost her strength long ago. For a moment, Luke couldn't even speak. He had never seen anything like this, someone left alone like that, helpless and worn out. Luke climbed off Bandit and approached her with slow, careful steps. He didn't want to scare her, but he also didn't know what had happened, or who might still be nearby. She lifted her head only slightly when she heard him. Her eyes were tired, unfocused, full of both fear and acceptance. Luke could tell she had already prepared herself for the worst. When he got close enough, she whispered, "Do whatever you want, cowboy." Those words hit him like a stone. Not because she meant them as a challenge or invitation, but because he could clearly hear the hopelessness behind them. She didn't expect kindness from anyone. She didn't expect safety, help, or even understanding. She said it like someone who had already given up, like someone who believed no one in the world cared about her fate. Luke immediately shook his head. "No, ma'am," he said quietly. "I'm here to get you out of this, not to hurt you." He knelt behind the fence post, examining the ropes. Whoever tied her there hadn't cared about her comfort or safety. The rope cut into her wrists, leaving red marks. Luke worked carefully, pulling his pocket knife from his belt and cutting through the rough strands without touching her skin. He kept his voice calm and steady the whole time, hoping it would help her understand she was safe now. As he worked, she watched him with confused eyes. She didn't speak again, not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't seem to trust her own voice. Luke didn't ask her any questions yet. She needed help first, not conversation. When the last piece of rope fell away, her arms dropped forward, weak and shaking. He gently supported her so she wouldn't fall. "You're all right now," he said softly. "Let's get you on your feet." It took some effort, but Luke helped her stand. She was lighter than he expected, not because she was small, but because she was exhausted. Her legs trembled under her weight. Luke wrapped an arm around her back to keep her steady. She didn't pull away. In fact, she leaned slightly toward him as if she realized she finally had someone she could depend on. Bandit waited patiently. Luke guided her to the horse, lifting her carefully into the saddle. She clung to the saddle horn, breathing slowly and deeply, as if even that small action took all the strength she had left. Luke climbed up behind her so he could keep her balanced. He kept one arm around her to make sure she didn't slide off, and Bandit began walking toward the cabin with calm, steady steps, as if understanding how fragile she was. The ride back felt longer than usual. The wind grew cooler as night approached, and Luke could feel her shivering every now and then. He gave her his coat, wrapping it around her shoulders. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't need to. The way she held it close showed more gratitude than words could. As they rode, Luke thought about who might have done this to her. Apache women traveled with their families or groups. They didn't wander alone. Something bad had happened. But he didn't want to overwhelm her with questions before she had a chance to rest. For now, all that mattered was getting her to safety. When the cabin came into view, warm light glowing from the windows, the woman's breathing grew calmer. Maybe it was the warmth, maybe it was the feeling of shelter, or maybe it was the simple truth that someone had finally found her before it was too late. Luke helped her down from the horse and guided her toward the door. She leaned heavily on him, her steps slow and uncertain, but she kept moving. Inside the cabin, the smell of wood and warmth welcomed them. Luke sat her down gently in a chair near the fireplace. Her eyes followed every movement he made as if she still didn't understand why he was helping her. "I'll get you some water," Luke said, setting a cup beside her. She took it with shaky hands and drank slowly, trying not to spill. He heated a pot of stew on the stove. The warm smell filled the room, and she closed her eyes for a moment, maybe remembering how it felt to be safe. When he handed her a bowl, she ate carefully, slow but steady. With every bite, she seemed to return a little more to herself. Luke sat across from her and waited until she finished eating before speaking again. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "No one's going to hurt you here. When you're ready, you can tell me what happened, but only when you're ready." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes still held fear, but there was something new, trust beginning to form. Slowly but surely. She opened her mouth as if trying to say something, but changed her mind. Instead, she gave a small nod. Luke didn't push her for more. He put another log on the fire and made sure she was warm enough. She watched him move around the cabin like she was studying him, trying to decide whether he was truly the kind of man he seemed to be. She finally whispered, softer than before, "Why did you help me?" Luke paused and looked at her. "Because someone should have. And I was the one who found you." Her eyes lowered, and she nodded again, this time with a hint of relief. As the night slowly settled around the cabin, the world outside grew dark and quiet. Inside, the fire crackled softly, and the Apache woman rested in the chair, wrapped in Luke's coat. Her breathing steadied, and the tension in her shoulders began to fade. It had been a long, painful day for her, but she was no longer alone. Luke kept checking the windows and listening for any danger, but the land outside was silent. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know who she was, or why someone had tied her to that fence. But he knew one thing clearly. He had done the right thing, and something told him that this night was only the beginning of a story neither of them could have predicted. When morning light touched the cabin windows, Luke woke to the soft crackle of the fire that had burned low through the night. He had stayed half awake for hours, making sure the woman was comfortable and that no danger approached. She had slept sitting up at first, too tense to relax. But later, she leaned back in the chair and drifted into a deeper sleep. Now, as the warm sun filtered inside, she stirred slowly, blinking in confusion, as if trying to remember where she was. Luke kept his distance to avoid startling her. He set a kettle on the stove and poured warm water into a tin cup. When she noticed him, she sat straighter, her eyes alert, though still tired. "You're safe," Luke reminded her softly. "You're at my ranch. You fainted for a bit last night. I didn't want to move you too much." She nodded, though her fingers curled nervously around the edges of the coat he had given her. Luke could see she was trying to gather her thoughts. She wasn't ready to tell him everything yet. But she also looked like she needed someone to listen. "Would you like warm water?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. He handed her the cup, and she sipped slowly, steadying herself. The warmth seemed to help her speak. "My name is Mina," she said, her voice soft but clearer than the night before. Luke nodded respectfully. "I'm Luke. I'm glad I found you when I did." Mina looked down at her hands, which still showed faint rope marks. She rubbed her wrists slowly as she prepared herself to speak again. Luke didn't rush her. He sat on the other chair near the fireplace and waited quietly. After a long moment, Mina began explaining what had happened. Her words came out slowly, as if each one carried weight. "A group of outlaws stopped me yesterday," she said. They were traders, but not honest ones. They asked me to guide them through my people's land. I refused. Luke listened closely. He had heard rumors about such groups, men who traded goods along the border but sometimes crossed lines they shouldn't. Mina continued. They didn't want to leave without getting what they wanted. I tried to walk away, but they grabbed me. They argued among themselves, saying I should help, or they would scare me into helping. She took a breath. Steady, but pained. They tied me to your fence to frighten me. They said someone would come by and then I would talk. Luke clenched his jaw, not out of anger at her, but anger at the men who had treated her so carelessly. Mina, however, spoke with surprising calm. I don't know why they left so suddenly. Maybe they heard riders. I'm not sure. Her voice grew softer. I thought night would fall before anyone found me. She looked at him then, her eyes holding something deeper than simple gratitude. There was disbelief, too. Disbelief that he had stopped, that he had helped her without expecting anything from her. Luke nodded slowly. I'm sorry you went through that, Mina. But I'm glad you're here now. You're safe, and we'll figure this out. Mina studied him for a long moment, as if testing the truth of his words. She had grown up hearing many things about ranchers and settlers, some stories fair, some not. Luke suspected she was trying to understand what kind of man he really was. You helped me, she whispered finally. When I saw you at the fence, I thought you would turn away like others did before. She stopped, not wanting to revisit those memories. I didn't think someone would care. Luke shook his head. Anyone with a heart would have stopped. But the way she looked at him said she didn't believe everyone carried the same sense of responsibility. He stood and walked to the stove, giving her space. He prepared a small breakfast, eggs, cornbread, and more warm water. Mina watched the cabin's surroundings while he cooked, her eyes drifting from the shelves to the tools hanging on the walls. She seemed to be studying everything, as though trying to understand the world she had fallen into. When the food was ready, Luke set a plate in front of her. Mina ate slowly at first, unsure if she should take more than a few bites. When he told her she could eat as much as she wanted, she relaxed a little more, though not completely. After breakfast, Luke stepped outside to check the land. He didn't go far, but he wanted to make sure no outlaws were lurking around. Everything looked normal: quiet fields, grazing cattle, and distant hills glowing in the morning sunlight. But he noticed something else: tracks. Faint footprints near the fence line that didn't belong to him. They led away from the ranch toward the deeper land beyond. It made his concern grow. When he returned inside, Mina looked at him with curiosity, sensing something was on his mind. You think they might come back? She asked quietly. They might, Luke admitted. But I'll keep watch. And once you're rested, we should figure out how to get you home safely. The mention of home softened her expression. She reached up and touched the woven necklace she wore. My people must be searching for me, she said. They wouldn't leave until they found me. Not, Luke nodded. He knew Apache families were tight-knit, protective of one another. But he also knew misunderstandings could happen fast in this region. If Apache riders found Mina at his ranch without knowing the truth, trouble could rise before anyone had time to explain. We'll go to them soon, he said gently, but you need more strength before we travel. Mina didn't argue. Her body was still weak, and she knew it. She sat back in the chair and let the warmth of the fire settle around her. For the next few hours, the cabin stayed quiet. Mina dozed on and off, gaining strength little by little. Luke used the time to gather supplies, saddle Bandit, and make sure there was food for the road. He didn't know how long the trip would take, but he wanted to be prepared. Every now and then, Mina opened her eyes and watched him work. She noticed how careful he was, how he didn't rush or show frustration. She watched how he checked the windows, how his eyes scanned the horizon. Even from inside, it made her realize something: he wasn't helping her because he was brave or proud. He was helping her because he genuinely couldn't leave someone in need. That kind of person was rare. In the afternoon, Mina stood slowly, testing her strength. Luke hurried to her side, ready to steady her if she needed help. But she insisted she could walk on her own. "You're still a bit shaky," he said. "I'll be fine," she replied softly. Though her legs trembled slightly, Luke walked her outside so she could breathe fresh air. The valley stretched far and wide, peaceful under the bright sky. Mina took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs. It felt like the first true breath she'd taken since yesterday. She turned to Luke. "Your land is quiet." "Most days, yes," he replied. "I try to keep it that way." Mina gave a small smile, the first one he'd seen from her. It wasn't a big smile, but it carried warmth, a sign that she was beginning to feel human again after everything she had endured. As she stood there, the memories of her capture replayed in her mind, but they no longer felt suffocating. She knew she wasn't alone now. Luke noticed the shift in her expression. "You're getting stronger already." "I feel stronger," she admitted. "Stronger than yesterday. Strong enough to face what comes next." Luke respected her spirit. She wasn't simply a woman who needed rescue. She was someone with courage. Someone who endured something harsh and still stood tall. He cleared his throat gently. "When we go to your people, you'll need to explain what happened. They might think I had something to do with it." Mina nodded firmly. "No. I will tell them everything. You saved me, Luke. They need to know that." Her words carried honesty, and Luke felt a quiet relief wash through him. He didn't do what he did for thanks, but hearing her promise to speak the truth eased the worry he had been carrying. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft orange colors, Mina sat outside on a small bench, leaning against the cabin wall. Luke sat nearby, keeping watch over the land. The silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It felt peaceful, like two people sharing the same calm moment for different reasons. Mina looked over at Luke and said softly, "Yesterday, I felt like my world was ending. But today, it feels like it's beginning again." Luke nodded. "Sometimes it just takes one person crossing your path at the right moment." She looked away, her eyes reflecting the sunset, and whispered, "I'm glad it was you." Luke didn't respond with words. He simply gave her a gentle nod, because he knew that sometimes silence carried more meaning than speech. Night began to settle again, but this night felt different. Mina was no longer frightened, and Luke no longer felt uncertain. Tomorrow they would ride to her people. Tomorrow the truth would be told, and tomorrow the land that had nearly swallowed her would see her return alive, safe, and stronger than before. Morning arrived quietly, with soft golden light spreading across the land and touching the edges of the ranch like a gentle hand. Mina woke before Luke, stepping outside for a moment to breathe in the cool air. Her body still ached, but she felt steadier than the day before. She stood near the fence, looking toward the distant hills where her people lived. Her heart felt heavy with worry. She knew her family must be searching for her. She knew they would fear the worst. And she also knew that the sight of her beside a rancher could create confusion, if not handled carefully. Luke came out of the cabin after a few minutes, rubbing sleep from his eyes. When he saw Mina standing alone outside, wrapped in his coat, he walked toward her with quiet steps. "You feeling stronger today?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Stronger. But we should go soon. My people will not rest until they find me." Luke agreed. He had already prepared for the journey the night before. Bandit was saddled, and Luke had packed enough food and water for both of them. The ride wouldn't be too long, but it would take time because Mina could not travel fast. Mina looked at him thoughtfully. "You don't have to come all the way. You could take me part way, and I can walk the rest." Luke shook his head firmly. "I'm not letting you go alone, not after everything that happened. I'll take you to your people. Mina, we'll do this the right way." His voice carried steady reassurance, and she felt something inside her settle, something that had been restless since the moment she escaped danger. She trusted him more than she had trusted anyone outside her own people. Luke helped her climb onto Bandit, and she settled gently into the saddle. He mounted behind her, keeping his arm lightly around her to support her balance. Mina still felt a little embarrassed, needing help, but she also felt safe, and that safety mattered more than her pride. The journey began slowly. The morning breeze brushed against them, carrying the sounds of quiet fields and far-off birds. The land stretched wide, open, and peaceful. But even in the calm, Luke stayed alert. He kept scanning the horizon, watching for signs of the outlaws who might still be in the area. Mina noticed his careful eyes and finally asked, "Do you think they might return?" "It's possible," he answered honestly. "Men like that don't give up easily, but I won't let them get near you again." She lowered her head in appreciation. She still remembered the fear from the day before, the feeling of being alone and trapped. That memory made her even more grateful for the presence behind her now. As they continued riding, Mina started telling Luke more about her home. She explained how her people lived by certain paths, how they respected the land, and how each family group looked after one another. Luke listened with interest. He always knew the Apache lived with strong traditions, but hearing Mina speak about them made the culture feel real and alive. She told him, "My brother, Chemo, will be searching for me. He never lets trouble stand in his way when it comes to family." Luke nodded. "Good man then. He'll be glad to see you." Mina smiled softly, thinking of her brother's fierce loyalty. But then her expression shifted to concern. "If he sees us together without understanding what happened, he might think you're the reason I disappeared." Luke sighed, fully aware of the risk. "That's why we'll explain everything together. I won't let a misunderstanding turn into something worse. I want your people to know the truth." She looked back at him, her eyes filled with something warm and sincere. "I know you do. That's why I trust you." Those words settled inside Luke gently, like a quiet reward he didn't expect. Helping her was simply the right thing to do, but hearing that she trusted him eased the tension he carried. After an hour of slow travel, the landscape began to change. The open fields gave way to rocky paths and scattered trees. Mina straightened slightly, recognizing familiar signs. "We're getting close," she said. "My people sometimes wait in clearings ahead." Luke tightened his hold slightly, guiding Bandit carefully. "We'll take it slow and steady." They moved deeper into Apache land. Mina watched the surroundings closely, looking for signs only someone from her tribe would notice. A broken branch, tracks in the dirt, a feather tied to a tree limb. These small signs meant everything. They were messages between her people, silent communication about movement, safety, and direction. She pointed ahead. "Someone passed through here early this morning. They were searching for me." Luke studied the ground where she pointed and nodded in understanding. He admired how easily she read the land. Where he saw dirt, she saw a story. Another hour passed. Mina's breathing grew heavier from the effort of traveling, but she didn't complain. Luke adjusted his hold around her, making sure she stayed steady. Then, suddenly, Bandit stopped, not because Luke pulled the reins, but because the horse sensed something. Mina's eyes widened, her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're here." Mina's eyes. Before Luke could respond, several Apache riders emerged silently from behind a ridge. They were on horseback, moving with swift, practiced coordination. Their faces were serious, their expressions alert. They surrounded Luke and Mina from a distance. Not attacking, but not relaxed either. Luke raised his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. Mina held the saddle horn tightly but did not panic. She knew these riders. She recognized one of them instantly, her brother, Chemo. Chemo's eyes locked onto Mina, and for a moment, shock passed across his face. But then, his gaze shifted sharply to Luke, standing close behind her. Luke felt the weight of that stare. It was the look of a protective brother ready to defend his family. Chemo rode closer, his voice strong. "Why is my sister with you? What happened?" Mina immediately spoke before Luke could answer. "Chemo, listen. This man saved my life." But Chemo didn't relax. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed. "Saved you? Or took you?" Mina shook her head firmly. "No. The outlaws tied me to a fence. He found me. He helped me. He cared for me until I was strong enough to come home." Some of the riders exchanged glances. Their expressions shifted slightly, but not enough to lower their guard yet. Luke kept his voice calm and respectful. "I found her tied up and alone. I brought her back to my ranch so she could recover. I'm just trying to get her home safely." Chemo stared at him for a long moment. The silence stretched, filled with tension. Mina could feel her brother's inner battle, his relief at seeing her alive, and his fear that harm might have come to her. She placed her hand gently on Bandit's mane and looked directly at her brother. "I trust him, Chemo. I would not say that if it were not true." Those words finally reached him. Chemo took a slow breath. The stiffness in his shoulders loosened just slightly. He motioned for the other riders to lower their weapons, not completely, but enough to show they were willing to listen. Luke felt the tension drop a little in the air. Mina, too, breathed easier. But before anyone could speak again, the distant sound of hooves echoed across the land. Luke turned his head quickly. Mina's expression shifted to concern. From the opposite direction, more riders appeared this time. Not Apache. It was the sheriff and several townspeople, armed and alert, racing toward them. Luke's heart sank. He already knew what they must be thinking. Someone had probably seen him leave the ranch with Mina. Someone must have assumed she was being taken against her will. And now both sides, the Apache riders and the townspeople, were facing each other, with him and Mina caught in the middle. The clearing fell into a strained silence as both groups stopped a short distance apart. The sheriff spoke loudly. "Luke, step away from the woman. Are you being held?" Luke shook his head. "No, nobody's holding me. This is a misunderstanding." Mina looked between both groups, her fear returning, not fear for herself, but fear of what might happen if no one believed the truth. She drew a deep breath, knowing she had to act before things escalated. "Everyone stop," she said loud enough for both sides to hear. "There is no danger here. Please listen." Both groups stared at her, unsure. But Mina didn't back down. She stood tall on Bandit's saddle, gathering her courage. "The only danger here is misunderstanding," she said. "And we must not let that harm the peace between us." Her voice was steady, her message clear. Luke watched her with quiet admiration. She wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She was strong in a way few people understood. What happened next would decide everything. The clearing fell into a heavy silence as Mina stood tall on Bandit's saddle, her steady voice echoing between the two groups. Her brother's riders stared at her with mixed shock and relief, while the sheriff and the townspeople shifted uncomfortably, unsure what to believe. Even though Mina was still recovering, her presence carried strength that neither side expected. Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't waver. She was determined to speak for herself before the moment slipped into chaos. Chemo frowned with deep worry. Not because he doubted her, but because he could see how exhausted she still was. "Mina," he called gently. "You don't need to speak so soon. We will take you home first." But she shook her head. "If I stay silent, both sides will act without understanding, and that will hurt people who did nothing wrong." She looked at Luke briefly, and he noticed the way her eyes softened with trust. "This must be cleared here, not later." The sheriff stepped forward, confused and cautious. "Young lady, we thought you were in danger. Someone said they saw Luke leaving with you early this morning." Mina looked at him calmly. "He was helping me return home. I chose to ride with him." The sheriff hesitated. He had known Luke for years and trusted his character. But seeing him with an Apache woman had triggered fear among the townsfolk. Many people still held old worries about interactions between the two communities. That fear didn't come from hate, it came from stories, misunderstandings, and the long history of tension between their lands. Luke raised his hand slightly to show he had nothing to hide. "Sheriff, she was tied to my fence when I found her. Outlaws did it. They left her there. Half fainted. I brought her to my cabin to care for her." One of the townsmen muttered under his breath, "How do we know that's true?" Mina immediately responded, "Because I am saying it." Her voice was sharp, but not angry. It was the voice of someone who had suffered enough and would not allow her rescuer to be doubted. "Those men forced me to help them. I refused. They tied me to frighten me. Luke found me. Luke helped me. Luke protected me. Her words cut through the tension like a blade of clarity. Chemo slowly stepped forward, his expression softening as he realized how much Mina trusted Luke. He looked directly at the sheriff. My sister does not lie. If she says this man saved her, then he saved her. The sheriff rubbed the back of his neck, caught between the expectations of the townspeople and the truth that was becoming harder to deny. We were just worried, he said more quietly. We didn't know what happened. Luke spoke gently, trying to ease the sheriff's uncertainty. I understand, Sheriff. You got a report from someone who didn't see the whole truth. Fear spreads faster than facts. The sheriff exhaled slowly, realizing Luke was right. But the tension had not disappeared yet. The two groups still faced each other with caution, each worried about what the other might do. Mina could sense the invisible wall between them, a wall that had stood for years. But now, in this strange and unexpected moment, she saw a chance to weaken it. She took a deep breath and spoke again, her words firm and heartfelt. This misunderstanding almost caused trouble, but none of us want that. Not my people, not the ranchers, not the town. We all want safety, peace, and truth. She turned toward her brother. Chemo, he did nothing wrong. There is no reason for anger. Chemo nodded slightly, but his protective instinct still lingered. If these outlaws are near, we need to find them. The sheriff straightened. And we'll help with that. If they tied her up once, they could cause more harm. For the first time since the riders arrived, both sides agreed on something. It was small, but it was enough to cool the air. Mina stepped down from Bandit with Luke's help. Her legs were still shaky, but she stood proudly between both groups. Her strength impressed everyone present. She had been through fear, pain, and confusion, yet she held herself steady, determined to protect the one person who had shown her kindness when she needed it most. Luke stood beside her quietly. He didn't speak unless needed. He respected that Mina's voice carried more weight here. She was the bridge between two worlds, and he knew it. Mina addressed the Apache riders next. Luke gave me food, warmth, and safe shelter. He stayed awake to watch over me. He treated me with respect. Do not forget this. One of the riders spoke softly. We believe you, Mina. Your words are enough. Then she turned to the townsfolk. My people will not harm anyone without reason. Fear only grows when we stay silent. Today, we break that silence. Her words touched many hearts, especially among the younger riders and a few townsfolk who had never heard an Apache woman speak with such openness. Luke noticed something he hadn't expected. Respect growing between the two groups. Slowly, carefully, but it was there. Chemo, still protective but now less tense, approached Luke. You have my gratitude, he said quietly. My sister lives because of you. Luke nodded respectfully. Anyone would have helped. Mina shook her head. No, not anyone. You chose to. Those words settled deep in Luke's chest. He didn't consider himself a hero, but Mina's sincerity made him realize the importance of simple kindness, especially in a world filled with suspicion and fear. The sheriff looked around and saw that both sides had finally lowered their guard. He stepped closer to Mina and spoke gently. If you want, we'll look for those outlaws together. The land is safer when our two sides communicate. Mina nodded. Working together is better than working apart, Chemo agreed. We will track them. But first, we take Mina home. Luke looked at Mina, unsure if she wanted him to follow. She gave him a gentle smile, filled with gratitude, but also a sense of peace. You'll come with us, she said softly. If you wish. Luke hesitated. He didn't want to intrude on her family. But the look in her eyes told him she wanted him nearby. Not because she needed help anymore, but because she wanted him to witness the moment she returned home safely. I'll come, he said. The sheriff stepped back with the townspeople. Everything's clear now. We'll give you space. And Luke? He paused, then added, You did the right thing. We were wrong to assume otherwise. Luke nodded. Thank you, Sheriff. Both groups began to separate, giving way to calmer ground. The townspeople rode back toward the settlement. The Apache riders formed a protective circle around Mina and Luke. But this time, it didn't feel threatening. It felt like acceptance. As they prepared to leave the clearing, Mina walked beside Luke. Today could have gone badly, she said quietly. But it didn't, Luke replied. Because you spoke up. Because you saved me, she answered softly. They exchanged a small, warm smile, nothing dramatic, nothing exaggerated, but full of quiet meaning. The path ahead would take them to her home, where the final truth would be shared, and where both communities might finally understand the power of compassion. And neither Mina nor Luke knew it yet, but everything that happened today was only the beginning of a bigger change, one neither side had expected. The ride toward Mina's village was slow but steady, and every passing minute felt different from the tense moments earlier that morning. The Apache riders moved calmly beside Luke and Mina now, no longer suspicious but protective in a natural, familiar way. Mina rode on Bandit with Luke walking close beside her, one hand lightly on the horse's reins. She was tired, but she didn't complain. Her eyes stayed focused on the trail ahead, where home waited. The land changed around them, tall grass gave way to sandy soil. Scattered trees grew closer together, and the path curved gently toward the foothills. Birds called from the branches, and the breeze carried scents of cedar and earth. Luke observed it all quietly. He had ridden near these lands before, but never this deep into Apache territory. He respected the silence of the riders around him and tried to match their calmness. What surprised him most was how peaceful everything felt. He realized how little he knew about the people who lived here, and how easily misunderstandings had shaped the world outside. Mina, sensing his quiet thoughts, looked back at him softly. You don't need to worry, she said. My people will not harm you. Luke met her eyes. I know. I trust you. Her shoulders eased a little. And they will trust you too, once they hear everything. One of the older riders, a man with deep lines on his face and a calm voice, spoke from beside them. Our people value truth. If you have done right, you will be welcomed. Luke nodded respectfully. I appreciate that. The riders guided them down a narrow path. As they approached a small ridge, Mina pointed weakly ahead. We're close. Just beyond that hill. Kimo's voice grew gentle. Our mother will be waiting. She hasn't slept since yesterday. Mina blinked fast, emotion rising in her eyes. Luke sensed her heart beating faster. It wasn't fear, it was the weight of going home after such a frightening experience. He walked closer to her, keeping his presence solid and supportive. She didn't say anything, but she leaned slightly in his direction, as if drawing strength from his steadiness. When they crossed the ridge, the village appeared below small homes, built from wood and clay. Children running near the fire pits. Women carrying baskets. Men repairing tools or tending horses. Everything looked peaceful, alive, and grounded in tradition. But when the people noticed the returning riders, especially Mina among them, movement stopped. A woman dropped a clay pot, letting it shatter on the ground as she ran forward. Mina stiffened in the saddle for a moment, stunned by the sight, then whispered, Mother. Kimo signaled for Bandit to stop. Luke helped Mina dismount carefully, knowing her legs were still weak. She barely touched the ground before her mother reached her and wrapped her in trembling arms. Mina held on tightly, her voice soft and emotional. I'm home, Mama. I'm safe. Her mother touched her face gently, checking her like a parent who needed proof that her child had truly returned. We searched all night, she whispered. We feared the worst. But you're here. You're here. Luke stepped back respectfully, wanting to give them space. The riders also kept their distance, watching with quiet relief. But Mina wasn't finished. She gently took her mother's hands and turned her toward Luke. Mama, she said softly. This man saved my life. Her mother looked at Luke with deep eyes that carried both gratitude and careful judgment. Luke bowed his head slightly in respect. unsure what to say. He had never expected thanks. He simply did what he felt was right. Chemo stepped forward and addressed his people. My sister was harmed by outlaws. They tied her and left her. This man found her, cared for her, and brought her home. A murmur spread through the village, not of fear, but of surprise. Many had prepared themselves to hear something far worse. Some approached carefully, wanting to understand the truth. Mina's mother took a step closer to Luke and spoke softly. You helped my daughter when she needed someone. For that, our family is in your debt. Luke shook his head gently. You don't owe me anything. I just did what any decent man should do. Mina looked at him with warm, steady eyes. Not everyone chooses to help a stranger. But you did, Luke. The village's elder, an older man with gray braids and calm wisdom in his gaze, walked toward Luke with slow steps. He studied Luke's face quietly. Then he nodded, as if confirming something only he sensed. You have a true heart, the elder said. That is something rare. He looked to the villagers. This man has done good. Let us respect his choices. Luke felt a wave of relief. He didn't want recognition. He only wanted peace between the groups, and for Mina to be safe with her people. But hearing acceptance from the elder warmed him in a way he didn't expect. The villagers offered warm water, blankets, and a place for Luke to rest. Mina insisted he stay by the fire, while she explained everything in detail to her family. She sat with her mother and brother, describing the outlaws, how she refused to guide them, how they tied her, and how Luke had found her and stayed by her side until morning. Each time she mentioned Luke, her voice grew softer, full of gratitude that could not be hidden. Her people listened with full hearts, and the more they heard, the more their opinion of Luke strengthened. After some hours, Chemo approached Luke. We will search for the outlaws later. But for now, the family would like you to share a meal. Luke hesitated, unsure if it was proper. But Mina appeared beside her brother and smiled gently at Luke. Please stay. This is our way of saying thank you. He nodded slowly. I would be honored. The meal was simple but warm, a stew made from vegetables and meat, shared among everyone. Children watched Luke with wide, curious eyes, whispering to each other. Some of the men asked him questions about ranch work, and he answered openly. The women thanked him quietly whenever they walked past. Luke felt welcome, something he had never expected. Mina sat near him, leaning into her mother's shoulder, but her eyes drifted to Luke often. She seemed at peace for the first time since he found her. As the night deepened, the fire crackled, and people slowly drifted back to their homes. Luke stood to leave, knowing it was time to return to his ranch. Mina noticed and approached him before he could say goodbye. You're leaving already? She asked, a hint of sadness in her voice. He nodded softly. You're home now. That's what matters. She stepped closer, her eyes warm and sincere. You changed everything, Luke. Not just for me, but for both sides. Today, we saw that trust is possible. She looked down briefly, then back into his eyes. I won't forget you. Luke felt something gentle pull at his chest. I won't forget you either, Mina. Her mother approached them with calm steps. Our home will always welcome you, Luke. Not as a stranger, but as someone we respect. Luke nodded deeply. Thank you. Chemo offered his hand, and Luke shook it firmly. You did right by my sister, Chemo said. If you ever need help, you know where to find us. Luke smiled. I'll remember that. Bandit was brought forward, and Luke mounted quietly. Mina came to stand beside the horse, her hand resting lightly on the saddle. She looked up at him, with a peaceful expression. When I was tied to that fence, she said softly, I thought no one would come. I felt alone in the world. She took a breath. But you arrived. You gave me a second chance. Luke met her gaze gently. And you showed courage no one else could. Their exchange was quiet, but full of meaning. As Luke began to ride away, Mina stood watching him until he disappeared beyond the ridge, the firelight behind her glowing softly. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "He is a good man," her mother whispered. "Yes," Mina replied. "And I was lucky he rode by that fence." Back on his ranch later that night, Luke stood outside his cabin, looking toward the distant hills where Mina's village lay. The wind was cool, the sky full of stars, and for the first time in a long while, he felt that something good had changed in the world. A small act of kindness had turned into a bridge between two communities. The land had witnessed fear, misunderstanding, and uncertainty, but it had also witnessed trust, courage, and quiet friendship. And though Luke and Mina now lived in different worlds again, both carried the memory of that day, a reminder that even in the hardest moments, compassion could rewrite a story no one expected.